confirmation set up? Because the United States policy under the Obama administration had not come out saying that it would support the election of whoever would be elected on November the 29th, whether or not President Zelaya was restored to power. When this took place, when the U.S. declared itself in favor of the elections, whether or not President Zelaya would be restored to power, this was a complete act of sabotage of the accord that was signed between the United States and between the Coup regime headed by Roberto Micheletti and President Zelaya and his negotiating team. That accord was signed on October the 30th, and very immediately after it was signed, the predecessor of Arturo Valenzuela was Thomas Shannon. He returned to Washington. He had an interview on CNN, and on that interview is when he said that the U.S. would, in fact, accept the results of the sham election, which is what President Zelaya calls it, in spite of the fact that President would not be restored. And so the spirit of the court included the return of President Zelaya to power, which means a return to democracy. It means returning President Zelaya as the elected leader of this country by the majority of people 4 years ago. And the U.S. complicity in subverting the accord shows also their complicity in the coup itself and in the repression that has followed.
There will be a very interesting picture today, Andres, of Manuel Zelaya being escorted to the airport, is this right, by, well, who will be the president, Lobo?
Yes, that is right. We do know, in fact, that President Leonel Fernandez from the Dominican Republic and President Colon from Guatemala will come here to the embassy. This is the plan. We don't know exactly if President-elect Lobo, soon to be inaugurated as president, will in fact come to the embassy and escort President Zelaya to the airport. That is yet to be seen, but you are absolutely right. That would be a very interesting picture. And we have to note the involvement of the resistance. This nonviolent resistance that was born on June the 28th has grown incredibly with daily protests for many, many months until the election. They were in the streets. They faced severe repression. They continued to be creative with their artistic expression and with showing that they believed in democracy and they were willing to put their lives on the line. The resistance today will be at the airport to bid farewell to their president, Manuel Zelaya Rosales. And that will be the picture that will be most important to show around the world, that this democratic movement that has survived the repression in spite of the coup and in spite of U.S. policy, they are alive and well, and they are growing. They are the ones who are asking for a new constitution that will respond to the needs of the people and not to the military, economic, and political elite of this country, which currently benefits from the constitution that exists.
And the human rights record in Honduras during the time that President Zelaya was ousted?
Yes, it's very clear that the repression escalated enormously after June 28th coup. President Zelaya clearly stated there were over 4,000 human rights violations. These included 3,000 illegal detentions, 114 political prisoners. It included 130 killings, that is, outright political assassinations, and many of those bodies were tortured, decapitated, and they included Wendy Avila, who was killed right here outside the embassy as a result of the tear gas attack, and over 450 wounded and hospitalized. We also have to point out the rapes, the political motivated rape of women has also been a very severe form of the repression caused by the coup regime. Also the attacks against the Afro-Caribbean people, the Garifuna people. They have faced decades of repression by the economic elite and military elite of this country, and recently they suffered an attack on their community radio station. It's called Sweet Coconut. It's located up in Triunfo de la Cruz on the coast of Honduras. And these Garifuna people are part of the nonviolent resistance that will be going to the airport today to bid farewell to President Zelaya.
Where will President Zelaya live? He's going to the Dominican Republic, but where will he then reside? And can he ever run for president again in Honduras?
The plans of President Zelaya are, after he leaves Honduras, he will be either a few days or up to a week, or at most a few weeks in the Dominican Republic. But then his plan is to go to Mexico. He will reside in Mexico for as long as the foreseeable future. But his intent is to return to Honduras, not to run again as president, because that is barred in the Constitution. But he wants to continue to be a political leader of the people and of the resistance movement that has been born as a result of this coup. And President Zelaya has clearly declared his allegiance to the people and to the process toward a constituent assembly.
Andrés Conteris, finally, you and the others, how many are there outside of President and Mrs. Zelaya? And can you just walk outside the embassy once he has left, the Brazilian embassy, where you two have been holed up for 4 months?
On the 28th of, on the 21st of September was the day that President Zelaya arrived here to the embassy. And there were over 300 people who spent the night that night, and the next morning was the very repressive morning with the tear gas attack and the shrieking, shrill noise. And then slowly over time, these hundreds of people have left the embassy. There are now only 7 of us who are accompanying the First Lady Xiomara and President Zelaya. So there are 9 of us here in total. Our plans are to leave the embassy. Some of those who have left over the past few months have faced political charges, we believe, because they've dug deep into their records and found practically expired warrants. So there have been those who have been interrogated by the police after leaving the embassy. Some of us who are left, the 7 of us, may face that as well. But basically, there will be a lot of attention on us as well. So it's very likely that any repression against the Hondurans who have remained this long will not happen today, but it could happen very much in the weeks and months to come.
Andrés Tomás Conteris, thank you very much for being with us, speaking to us from inside the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa, perhaps for the last time, as he heads out as well. President Zelaya will be leaving Honduras today. That's the plan, going to the airport and flying to the Dominican Republic as the new president, which Zelaya supporters boycotted, didn't participate in the election in November, is escorted to the airport. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Best of luck, Andrés. We'll be back in a minute. Democracy Now!